Actually, 6 o'clock by my wrist. And Minnie Mouse is never wrong. I'm calling to order the Hartford Board of School Directors meeting for January 22nd. First item on the agenda is changes, additions, and approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any items or any changes they wish to make? All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
The motion to approve the agenda having been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Yes. Yes, we both said aye.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. The agenda is passed as presented. By the way, in case it hasn't been noted, we have a quorum of 3 members at the moment. Garrett is not joining us because he is attending his child's concert at the Ottaquiche School. And Coach called to say he is going to be a little bit late. So until Coach comes, I will be managing this. So the first issue on the agenda is the superintendent search and the issue of the interview questions. Who is addressing this?
You.
Okay,
I'm a good delegator.
that's wonderful, except I don't see anything here in the packet.
Do you have anything on this?
He wasn't given anything.
All right,
It was tabled from last week's meeting.
right, we were asked to vote on
Yeah.
questions, but I think Kevin was wanting to bring this forward again and was going to speak to it, but he
The
didn't
only thing
provide.
that Kevin asked me to put in the packets was the search committee on the very last page.
Okay, then do we know who brought forward the interview questions and the
I think Kevin was one.
address that?
Yeah.
All right, so we will table that for the moment. If Coach Christie shows up, we can ask him to address that issue when we get to it. Second issue on the agenda is the most important issue for us at the moment, the budget. We are running out of time to get it approved and signed for and off to the printer and everything. So we have various deadlines we have to meet. So first item under budget is information from the interim superintendent. I believe is a report back on possible uses of the funds that we had requested that you address.
Yes, so at our last meeting, the board requested that I work with the administrative council to determine how we might use some additional funds if we had the opportunity. And as I recall, the number that was thrown out there is if you had an additional $450,000, how would you use those funds next school year?
Right.
I brought that topic back to the administrative council. And where we reached consensus is that we would use those funds to shift critical positions out of title funds and into our local budget. Based on the uncertainty that we are aware of in terms of the future of title funds and the allocation at the federal level. We would like to preserve those positions and get them into a secure fund so that we know that they're available to us in future years.
Okay, thank you very much. So this had been as much as anything a thought experiment. We have looked at the budget and its impact on the taxpayers, and because the numbers for a change came back in our favor in terms of common level appraisal and so forth. The impact of the initial draft budget was not as harsh as it might have been. Doesn't mean it's not harsh, but it's not as harsh as it might have been. And there was some urging from members of the audience that we look at the issue of what would we do if we were free of budget constraints. And sort of to focus the mind, I had suggested that we consider not the full list of things that we were presented that the school officials would like to do if they had several $1 million more money than we have, but a very limited amount, which could be covered by the existing surplus. I believe that's an adequate description of what this experiment is about. So, does anybody have any thoughts on that would you like to share with the rest of us?
Yes. And not as harsh as what I started with, which was 0. Can we have Jacob? I don't know, can you put it on the screen of what the total amount at the moment, funny money that we think is coming to us? And then look at it as if we took 2%, 3% for the district and left the rest to go back for tax relief for the tax.
Sure. So if we're. Never mind, I'm gonna move Zoom world here. So if we're actually talking about adding $450,000 to the budget.
And then the thought experiment I have proposed was $450,000 added to the budget and then bought down with the surplus that we have. So spending would go up, but the amount of money that we would need to raise wouldn't go up because we would have had.
So that would still be a 13.5% projected decrease in the homestead and the projected 6.3% decrease on the income.
Okay. So, and then you wish to do this budget minus 2%? Or how did you, well, wasn't quite clear what your request was, Jacob.
My request was to look at the budget before any changes. In essence, whatever the budget ends up at the end of the school year
For last year,
for last,
so
and then add what I'm looking to is what does 3%
added to that,
add to that? What does that mean? How much is still left for the taxpayer versus how much went to the school district?
you understand that request?
And
So,
it's
he was wanting to know what a flat budget from what we spent last year would mean and what a flat budget plus an additional 2% would mean for the taxpayer. Using last year's, actually, I guess this year's projected actual budget. Or. So, you have the budget for. The actual budget that we adopted was 39,211.37, $371.
Peter, I'm sorry, I think that there's some people who can't really hear that well.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so as an experiment, Mr. Heavysides has proposed having us deal with a flat budget, i.e. no increase from this year's budget for next year. So have exactly the same budget we had for FY 2025, which we're about halfway through, as for next year. And that would, of course, would effectively be a cutting of a lot of things, because there are a lot of expenses that went up. So to counter that, we would need to cut various other things which we haven't discussed, but Doug Heavysides would like to see what that would look like. So if we put in, instead of the 43 million number,
The 5104.
the 39 or the equivalent number for this year,
You want what, 3%?
just flat at the moment, and then add, you want the 2% on top of that? 3% on top of that. So,
So flat, you would be looking at a 25.1% decrease on the homestead. And an 18.4% on the income. And then if you do 3%. That would get you a 21.2% decrease and a 14.3% decrease on income.
well, those are budgets that would be significantly reducing the tax burden, but would be also significantly impacting the school, because that's a lot less than the proposed budget, which was a skinny budget as it is.
I know, all I'm trying to find is the balancing point. There's relief for the taxpayer at the same time as supporting with the school district.
Right.
I mean, obviously we can't have it all. But it's just, I do not believe the public would pass the budget if they knew that there was the potential for this money. And none of it gave them a relief. Literally, if we took it and put it into the district budget.
So make sure I understand. You don't think that,
I don't think the public
yes,
would pass the budget
Yep.
if they knew that there was this amount of money coming back from the state, and it all went to the school district. They're looking, the citizens are taxed to the wazoo, and we need to give them some relief, which is fair.
right.
Some goes to the district, some goes to tax relief.
So if we had
That's why I'm sitting there
Yeah.
saying, if we look at this and we know what a 3% increase would do. And then how much was the tax relief to the public?
right, the problem I have, at least at this stage of your experiment, is we can propose any degree of cutting the budget and thereby reducing the tax burden on the taxpayers, but the impact on the school district in terms of doing that hasn't been discussed. So what would the effect of turning around to the district and saying to them, please live on $52,575,241 mean in terms of programs that would be cut from the budget
Well,
that we
Well, see,
proposed.
if we're running it, putting in a budget that's status quo,
Mhm.
there should be no penalty or damage to any program they're doing currently. And if we add 3% of an increase, that's giving them some funds in which to do other things other than they're currently doing.
The problem with that is that it depends on what you mean by status quo budget. The budget that is proposed has a significant number of increases in it that are around contracted increases to teacher salaries, increases to other costs that are not subject to our control, healthcare and so forth, which means that a status quo budget would result in cuts to other programs because the teachers are going to get paid more because that's what the contract says. The healthcare is going to go up because that's what the contract says. And the list of other items that had been identified by the business manager would all be more expensive because that's what they cost now. So the money has to come somewhere if the taxpayers aren't paying for it. And maybe that's the right thing, but it's got to come from somewhere, and that means it would come from all of the other programs to make up for those increased costs.
So if we look at. We break the budget down, which is. What would the operating budget be for this year? Jacob must know what the contractual increase in dollars.
So that is on a page that we have.
So if we add that to the bottom line. And then give them their 3%. I mean, I'm not saying take away something they've already got, pay extra. What I'm looking for is the bottom line. That is presumably accurate for this year. Add your contractuals of what we have signed for and committed. Put that number in there, add 3%. And then what's the balance? The balance is what goes back to the taxpayer. If there isn't, but there should be. But at the same time, we all have to understand this is funny money. We don't know until June what the state's actually going to give us.
Right. So. So according to the document which has been provided by our budget manager, the budget that we adopted for the year we are in i.e. the general fund expenditure, so they're the larger in total because there are things that are not in the general fund, was $39,211,000. The budget that they have proposed for this year has just under $4 million of additional spending. Reaching,
Is that the contractual dollars?
that is
The
the,
bump in
right, so
Yes.
that includes,
Salaries.
yes,
healthcare and whatever.
right, exactly.
All right, so you add that.
Mhm.
And then turn around and give them an extra 3%.
Percent on top of that,
That's right.
okay,
And then. What's the money that's left,
okay.
if there isn't?
So if you were to take our current budget, which has, according to this number, the $55 million number, and add 3% to that, what would that impact be on the taxpayers?
That would be a 9.3% projected decrease on homestead and a 1.8% projected decrease on income based.
So,
Again, though, I want to caution with that because that would start to push us upwards for our cost per pupil as
Right.
that threshold.
right, and would that get us over the threshold where
And that's that.
there is that consideration? The state makes it harder and harder each dollar you try to raise.
That would put us over the excess spending threshold.
Can you play it all the way through to figure out what the ultimate impact would be? So we can answer Mr. Heavyside's. I understand.
Not sure exactly how that excess spending threshold would impact these numbers.
Because everything feeds into everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And obviously, we would start to income base, you'd probably be looking at a tax increase. And then homestead would probably be below 3%.
That includes the penalty, Jacob.
Yeah. So definitely,
so below 3% in reduction or
Or-
below 3% in an increase for the,
increase.
okay, so somewhere. It would result in a tax increase.
Yeah.
Over last year. So if a 3% increase on the budget that we have proposed would result in a net tax increase for our citizens. Because of the way the system works, there's a expected level funding per pupil. If you go significantly up that, they start charging you more and more money. Because you're being more extravagantly want to pay. So that is the answer. So if you were to look at, say, a 1% or so, it probably would fall below the but you see it ramps up pretty quickly.
We looked at it, doesn't work, so be.
Okay, So, any other thoughts or? Okay. So we have looked at the impact of the budget, which has been brought forth to us by the school administrators, which would result in a net reduction of taxes of 13.5% for based on homestead value and 6.3% for those paying based on income sensitivity. We have looked at the impact of the same budget with $450,000 additional added in. That 450,000 to be paid for out of our savings, which basically has the same taxpayer impact, more or less. And we therefore have, and we've also looked at what would happen if we were to increase the spending by the district by 3% above what was proposed by the administration. We have seen that that would result in a small-ish, in terms of the numbers we've been talking about, tax increase, but it would definitely be a tax increase.
Just a number.
Right, and we're trying to avoid a tax increase. So based on those sort of points for the budget, do we want to have a conversation about where we think we should fall out? Do we want to go with a straight budget presented by the school administrators? Do we want to do that and attempt to secure the jobs that are currently funded by grants? Or do we wish to do something else?
I think we accept what,
Has been proposed?
right,
Okay. So, do you wish to make a motion? What's
So moved.
so? There's a second?
So what was presented to us from the
Okay.
administration.
That's been moved and seconded that we bring forward to the taxpayers a budget in the amount of $55,095,949, which translates into a expenditure per weighted pupil of $16,035.34, resulting in a decrease in property taxes of 13.5% for those paying based on homestead value and 16.3% reduction for those paying based on income sensitivity.
You said 6.2.
I'm sorry, 6.3. I apologize, misspoke. That is a reduction of 6.3% for those paying based on income sensitivity. That is the motion before us.
Yep.
All right. That having been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, since there's nobody here to oppose it, the ayes have it, 3-0. All right,
Is the board going to be taking any action for offsetting 450,000 for next year, or is that no a discussion now?
I didn't know.
he wanted to know whether we were going to do the $450,000 offset or not. If we were to do this, not to raise money for the position, but just to reduce the taxes further.
No, so, I guess my question is just if, whether or not the board is going to vote to offset 450,000 for future projects, positions. And just setting that money aside because we
Yeah.
need an official vote if we're going to do that.
Yes, and that was not part of the proposal. We just were going with the flat budget that was brought forward. So that's a no. All right. So. Then. The next step is to finalize. What do we need to do? I think we've just finalized it. And so that means we need to do the warning. And I believe you have the paperwork already prepared. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So. Next item on the agenda. Public comments.
Heidi Dudo has her hand raised.
All right. Yeah, ideas. So is your hand.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Good evening, Heidi Duto, White River Junction, Vermont. Thank you for allowing me to speak and ask my questions. Could someone just clarify for me that this budget that's being proposed and just signed by the school board is based off of the possible state percentages coming down? I mean, I don't understand how you can make a budget on proposals. That's my first question.
That is correct in that we do not have the final numbers from the state and will not have the final numbers until June. And so we don't have a choice.
So is this based off of the CLA going up?
This is going based on the assumption that the CLA is going to be at 100%, which is an assumption based on the fact that the grand list was just reappraised, and therefore the grand list should be very, very close to its actual value, and there should be minimal, if any, adjustment by the state in June. And it's also based on the fact that when we reached out to the government for saying what number should we use, they suggested an even higher number.
Okay. So in this budget, are you taking into consideration the $21 million bond and the increase to the taxpayers?
It's all baked in.
That's included.
Okay. So right now we're looking at a decrease, if I
Yes,
understood you correctly, not an
We're-
increase?
We are projecting a decrease based on the current numbers that we have.
Okay, because the town just approved last night like a 4.1 something percent increase. So that you're saying that what you're doing is gonna offset their proposed budget to
No,
drop the tax budget. Is that correct?
no, the two are totally independent. It
I
just happened,
understand.
yeah, so, because of the formula used to determine taxes in the state of Vermont, the budget that we have proposed results in a lower tax rate than last year's tax rate. That's all we can say. It wasn't in any way a reaction to the municipal budget.
No, I didn't say a reaction to. I'm
Well-
just asking if your budget would counteract their proposed budget and actually drop an individual's taxes on their property, both on their homestead and their school bill, because they're two separate. I understand.
Yeah, I don't know you just gave me more information than I had on what the town is doing. I don't know what the dollar impact would be, and it would probably depend very largely on your individual situation. Because the tax on schools is mediated by the income sensitivity functions. And that's going to depend a great deal on where you are. So I can't really answer that without actually knowing more than I know at the moment.
Because I
It
know that a
certainly would
lot of
help.
what?
It certainly would help. The fact that
Well-
but
I know there's a lot of families that really are struggling, and I'm just trying to grasp how this is going to affect not the not just one group, but everyone.
right. So as was stated, this is a reduction from the tax rate that was imposed last year. What that actually means in actual dollars depends on what your new valuation is on the grand list, whether or not you are subject to income sensitivity or not. But as a general matter, the rate went down. The amount that will actually be collected is dependent on facts that we don't have. But the rate did go down. We can say that much. That is, I am sure, going to be welcome news to a lot of our citizens, because as you said, it's been tough times for a lot of people and for a long time. It's also, however, going to mean a significant degree of hardship for the schools, which have to live within a budget that is very, very tight.
Okay, thank you.
No other hands raised on Zoom.
Harry Russell, I'm the district social worker here in Hartford. I am just concerned that the members for the search committee got tabled only because they need to be approved before the initial first meeting, which happens on the same day as the next meeting. And so if they haven't been approved, I'm concerned. So I just wanted to make sure that item didn't get overlooked.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that was not placed on the agenda. The interview questions issue was placed on the agenda.
Jacob mentioned at the beginning that it had been added. It's the final page of the packet.
Okay.
The back of that page.
Okay,
And it was under the superintendent search item.
okay.
That's
So I certainly think we should try to get that moving. And we do have the right to amend the agenda. Do I have a motion to amend the agenda to add this to the agenda?
So moved.
Second, I said it's been moved and seconded to add the issue of the membership of the superintendent search committee to the agenda. Having been moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing nothing, that motion is passed. We're going to amend the agenda to add this issue. So somebody wish to speak to the members and the,
I guess that's me.
yes, thank you.
My understanding is I'm giving you the list. It
Right.
was, based on people who reached out,
Mhm.
the equity coordinator and myself created a rubric and figured out who could be on it based
Right.
on the information we had, based on gender, which we had, and the tie to which schools, and we worked on having a balanced group based on the candidates we had.
Okay,
And we thank
thank you. And we do need to move this forward because we
Yes, we
need
do.
to have a superintendent next year. So. Any comment, any discussion? All right, hearing neither. Somebody want to make a motion with respect to approving the proposed committee to select superintendent?
Say that again.
We need a motion.
Okay. So that they can do the selection. You got it. Move.
So, let's be clear, it has been moved that we accept the list of members for the superintendent search committee. There are two committee members from the community at large. They are Teresa Johnson and Dennis Curran. Two parents or caregivers, Jason Hill from the White River School area and Linda Johnston from OQS. Three teachers, Stephanie Cardente, I hope I pronounced that correctly, pre-K teacher at OQS. Amanda Nilsson, art teacher at the high school, and Emma Woodruff, a teacher at the middle school. One student, Maria Chapu, from the middle school. Two administrators, Erica Schneider from the Hartford Area Career Technical Center. And Rick Dustin Eichler, principal at DBS. He also has a relationship with somebody in the high school.
He does.
One central office staff member, Kim Dumont. One special educator, Heather Obar, and one staff at large, Jonathan Garthwaite, who is our superintendent, our person in charge of all the buildings and the infrastructure. So that is the proposed group that would select the superintendent. So. Any further discussion at all? All right. All those in favor of adopting the slate?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? It's adopted. All right. That brings us to the consent agenda. Are there any appointments, resignations, or retirements?
We have one request for a release from contract. And this is at the Dothenbrook School, Alexandra D. Felice.
Right? And does the superintendent have a suggestion whether it is our interest to do that or not?
Yes, I would move forward with that.
All right. So. And no other. Okay. Any other comments? Anything in the minutes? I would make one comment on the minutes. There's a typo. Yes, Under section 2, governance process, second line, halfway through that line, it says the period NG air sample. I think that should be corrected to read the air sample. Other than that, I have no corrections.
I so move that we accept the consent agenda with the corrections to the minutes.
And okay. Having been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Nobody, so the consent agenda has been approved. I would note that the next board meeting is scheduled for 2/12/2025. And in the absence of Garrett, Nancy, would you do the meeting evaluation? It should be, it's always second page. Right there.
Before I do that, I would encourage everyone. Monday is the deadline that if you would like to run for a school board, for the school board, to get your signature card into Lisa O'Neill at the town, who is the town clerk at the offices. We'll have 2 openings. And I encourage you, come join us. It's tons of fun. Okay, board meeting monitoring. At the end of the board meeting, each board member and the superintendent or an appointed evaluator for the meeting completes this monitoring form. The responses are shared and a discussion is held on the areas that need improvement. The chair collects the completed forms to use in the board's monitoring reports. The board was prepared for the meeting, satisfactory. Board's time was spent on ends and not means, satisfactory. Each board member was given opportunity to participate, satisfactory. Board treated all members with courtesy and fairness, satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order as needed, satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles, used collective decision-making, and it looked to the future, satisfactory.
Thank you very much. At this moment, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
A motion to adjourn having been made and not being debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Notes all.
Someone should call Kevin to tell him that the meeting's over.
I'm sorry, say again.
Someone should call Kevin to tell him.
Oh,
the
yeah.
meeting's over. If he truly is driving here.
Right. Okay. We'll do that.
I'm not sure what I'm doing with the rest of my evening. I'm blocked.